Well, hello everyone again, and we're still in America, and we're entering sort of a new stage in American art. By now, I mean, portraits are still important, and portraits are still commissioned, except the artists themselves, the best artists, are not really interested in doing the portraits. They're interested in something else. In Europe now is the time of romanticism, of appreciating nature, or what's left of it in Europe, and considering it sublime. And here is where America had absolutely no competition, and they realized it very quickly, because the whole Europe envy, here Europe would envy them, and that there was, as we saw, a great sense, the fact that completely new country, without European civilization, and whatever civilization it had, these new settlers weren't interested in. It had no temples, it had no Romans, it had no Greeks, it had no medieval cathedrals, it had absolutely none of what Europe had. But it certainly had nature, and especially with the Puritan societies, and that spirit will always be in part of the American society. Suddenly they began to see nature as sort of one grand church, and if nature is the church, then the artists would be the clergy, because they would be the ones who could worship nature as no one else could, and convey the spectacular, the spectacle of nature to the rest of society, to the congregation, so to speak. Because the congregation, you see, originally, couldn't care less really about landscapes. The early Americans didn't see nature. They saw territory, they saw possession, they saw soil and water to run their sawmills, and a peasant working in land was not thinking of the glory of nature. So it was up to these landscape artists to do it, to show them what they were missing.
It's kind of interesting, in the same way that a soldier doesn't think about the glory of war.
Right,
a farmer
exactly.
who actually lives with it is going to treat it as a friend, not as an ideal.
Exactly. It's so true.
He has to wake up with it every morning at 6 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the idea of landscape, again, came from Europe. Claude Lorraine, who was a French artist in the 17th century, went to Europe, went to Italy, never left, and just spent most of his time painting this gorgeous bay in Naples. Well, and elsewhere, of course. Salvatore Rosa was another one. Then the English landscapists began. But now Americans, as I said, they found something that Europe certainly did not have. America had nothing but nature, great deal of it. And America, in fact, was now beginning to be obsessed with homesteading, and homesteading going west. And the more west they went, the more grandiose and sublime those landscapes began, of course. But really the father of the so-called the Hudson River Valley School of landscape painting was one Thomas Cole, who was English. His family sort of escaped the Satanic Mills in England, came to America, and he was originally sort of self-taught, but then he will go to London, he will spend time in Italy. Claude Lorraine will be his god, and so he really will show Americans how to paint landscapes. before we go west, the Catskill Mountains, the Delaware Valley, was being developed very quickly, and so Cole felt as if the the grandeur and purity of America were disappearing in front of his eyes in slow motion, and so as such he was very anxious to preserve it, to leave the record of it. And it just so there was this movement up the Hudson Valley, the Delaware Valley. That here I have here there's the Delaware Valley, and there's the Hudson Valley, and there in the Catskill Mountain there was a Catskill Mountain House. It opened in the early 19th century, in 1824. You see, there's a famous hotel near New York, overlooking the Hudson River Valley, right here. And in its prime, from about 1850s to the end of the 19th century, it was visited by 3 U.S. presidents, all the power elite of the day, and of course all these artists. Thomas Cole at the head of the brigade. It was in the morning, for instance, it was literally situated above the clouds, as the clouds gathered together above the valley, and it literally seemed to these people, who were also very much imbued with a moral message, it was seemed as if they were watching the primordial scenery before creation, in fact, not even prelapsian, before the fall of Adam and Eve, but literally primordial, before God began to actively create life on the planet. And chaos was there for them to see unfold. And as the clouds would disappear, as the sun would come up and the clouds would go away, the creation, they were watching creation, and that's very much how they felt there. So artists and writers discovered the Catskills sometime earlier, and shortly after this mountain house was constructed, so its surroundings became a favorite subject. Well, obviously Thomas Cole, the new Hudson River School, Hudson River Valley, Washington Irving, I mean the artists, the writers, the whole school of New York intellectual elite would gather up in the house. The site, the Mountains House site, the Pine Orchard, had long been famous for its panoramic views up and down the Hudson Valley, and even beyond. And then someone like James Fenimore Cooper had both written about it and had it in the context of his books. It doesn't exist, I think, anymore, the house. I mean, it was, there it is.
You're
up
kidding
the
me.
Hudson. I don't think it exists anymore. It's it kind of, after the start of the 20th century, it was visited less and less. And then also the interest in landscape painting deteriorated tremendously.
And no one's thought to rebuild it? I mean,
No,
it seems
I don't
like it would
think
be
so.
such a historic site.
I know. Here it is. Well, maybe somebody will now. Maybe after this disaster, we'll begin to appreciate nature.
Oh God, yeah.
So, there's Thomas Cole, and there's a view of the two lakes and the mountain house right there. And there's a Catskills Mountains. In the morning, he's painting himself into the picture, showing us how he sees this superb view himself, and how greatly we must appreciate nature as well, because we talked last time in this lecture about the Americans' idea of progress, and at this point, very much still, an axe was a symbol of progress, because never mind landscape, it's the territory, it's the land that can be developed. And an axe was a friend of a progressive men. Andrew Jackson was president at that time, and it just so happened that Thomas Cole abhorred him. He was a populist and a demagogue, no question about it. And well, he was the one who he just abhorred the whole idea of Native Americans and felt with all this spectacular land that we possess, it's certainly too good for the native tribes. So he is the one who engineered the relocation policy, the horrendous relocation policy, as a result of which hundreds of thousands of Native Americans will, of course, will perish. They'll just disappear. All of that, needless to say, wrapped in a cloak of the great sublime, and how good it will be for the Native Americans just to have their own territory away from a civilization that they're not interested in whatsoever. It was not good. So Thomas Cole, in fact, was sort of he was, I suppose, one of the first to introduce the debate about American resources and how precious they are. And then, as I said, he was really afraid that it's just disappearing in front of his eyes. And this is what he's trying to capture. It's a spectacular view where God is present. God is present, and but also the God the scientist and God the metaphysicist. God the scientist is present there because Thomas Cole is a very meticulous painter, and he paints, if not every leaf, he paints a great deal of detail, but he also is able to give it the overall idea of creation, the overall picture of grandeur. Here's another one. He is, as I said, born in England. The founder of the Hudson River Valley School. Family immigrated to Philadelphia, and then they settled in Ohio. He was trained by an itinerant portrait painter, and then spent 2 years. He went back to Pennsylvania, spent 2 years in the academy, but then he did go to Europe. As I said, he spent in England and in Italy, and the holy calm of nature and the holy hand of God for him will always be inseparable. And even in this landscape, it's again landscape of creation. It's as if the mountains move aside to allow us the view of God's miracle. It is lit up, as you see here in the foreground. Are the crags and broken branches, and the wildness of nature is emphasized, but hope is there as well, because the light comes in this dawn from the back of the picture, lighting up the forefront. So despite the wildness and despite the uncomforts, we have something to look forward to. I mean, they're great pictures. I mean, they're more intimate pictures as well. The pastoral for him, the pastoral and the wild would very much intermingle in his mind and join together. And in this picture, he is trying to recreate what he feels was the original landscape. Because you see, by now, even the mountain house, but then the other hotels are being built, and all of these are becoming summer outing places, resting places, vacation places. The American tourism is beginning. Right now, he realized that the natural sublime was there, but it was becoming a very overcrowded sublime, and he very much wanted to return it back to its pristine stage. I mean, this landscape. This is what it actually looks like today, and probably already looked like in at his time, and you see what he's doing. He's separating the two waterfalls considerably. He's giving it this tremendous vista, this beautiful distance. He's eliminated by now their rails for people to hold on to. Their steps now can't cut into the rock for people to move around, to enjoy themselves. They're picnic tables. So all of that, of course, he is eliminating altogether. It is fall, as you see, the russets, the oranges, the reds. Those are the colors he's using, because you see here, they're just sort of browns and grays and greens. He introduces all this lovely, lovely warmth. And again, the pristine rocks that he liked so much. Loved, one of his favorite themes was calm after the storm, or calm before the storm. So as such, we see storm clouds over there that are, the sun is on our side already. It's becoming lovely and warm, as I said, but in the background, the clouds are receding, even though the rain is still pouring. And he even introduces a figure of a Native American right here on the rock, a tiny figure, sort of as the only possessor of these lands. Well, there were no Native Americans by this time already there. I mean, that was smallpox, got rid of them. There still were tribes, plenty of tribes in the West, but really not here in the Delaware Valley. So this is how Cole reinterprets, but they're beautiful pictures, there's no question about it. And he commanded tremendous prices back in New York for them. But as I said, there's always this the moralistic side to him. So he uses, I mean, he never went west. Also another thing about Cole, he really never could paint a nude or a human body. So all the human bodies he will paint, and he'll paint plenty, but they'll all be small, so you don't exactly see that. He was great painting nature. I mean, some people just paint nature better than they paint human body. Yeah.
You know, I was just saying it's really interesting because you have so many people who will paint a nude and then they have no idea what to do with the background. I mean, it's
right.
like, and here's a twig, we call it a tree.
Well, frankly, Michelangelo had absolutely no interest in
back.
nature. I mean, zero.
Right.
He was only interested
Just
in
acorns.
Right.
Just acorns. So it's just funny that here he's like shrubbery, I can paint shrubbery.
Right. But
flesh, no flesh.
Yeah.
Shrubbery.
Yeah, Michelangelo is zero interest in nature, only the human flesh.
Funny how people are wired that way.
Huh?
Funny how people are wired that
Right.
way, even artists.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's the same theme really that we saw even here. That here is perhaps despair and wildness and, as you say, and the wind, but then calmness sets out once you leave here and go there into the beautiful sunset. So it's the sunrise. Sorry. So it's almost, this is the same thing, the same idea of the fallen humanity, which will ultimately be redeemed by God's mercy and by God's revelation. So he is a completely imaginary scene. This is not on Hudson River at all. This looks more like a South American landscape, but it's lush. It's full of life. It's full of promise. It's full of generosity. And these are the tiny little figures, as you see, as they are being thrown out of paradise into the wilderness. And into the wilderness they go, and there are all sorts of details. There's a waterfall going. Here's a wild dog or perhaps a wolf. The two of them are, of course, completely unprepared. There's wind and rain and misery. So that is his understanding of the expulsion from paradise. So this is literally, this is the prelapsing existence. Lapsus means the fall, a slip, and then so prelapsing is the existence in paradise.
A slip. They
A
slipped.
slip, right.
They slipped and fell out of paradise.
Exactly. And here, as he imagines, of course, the inhospitable world. Now, Masaccio, as you see, was not as interested in nature as Thomas Cole, and therefore his understanding that he actually paints the nudes directly. He used nature to discover the atmospheric perspective. He did that. There's no question about it. But this is his expulsion, and this is Thomas Cole. He was far more interested in rocks and trees and sublimity than he was in a human figure, because, well, he wasn't very good at doing the human figure. Now, because his God, his actual God, his on earth that existed was Claude Lorrain, and Claude Lorrain, French, one of the greatest masters of ideal landscape, the classical landscape, an art form that seeks to present a view of nature more beautiful and harmonious than nature itself, sort of idealized, very much an ideal landscape. And the quality of that beauty is governed by classical concept, and the classical concepts, of course, is the balance, the harmony, the equilibrium. And the landscape often contains classical ruins and pastoral figures in classical dress. So this would be the Claude Lorrain landscapes with some architecture. And the figures, it would never be just landscape on its own. There would always be a classical theme going on through the landscape. And his contemporaries usually knew what those were, whether something from Roman antiquity or Greek antiquity, and all these stories, of course, were told as one grew up, and that's what he painted. Let's see, the source of inspiration is the countryside around Rome, the Roman Campagna, countryside haunted with remains and associations with antiquity. This is something that America didn't have, but Cole will actually insert some antiquity into a number of his paintings. This painting is called An Oxbow, and it's one of the most famous of his paintings. And it is a view from Mount Holyoke in Northampton, Massachusetts, after a thunderstorm. And there again, the painting is divided. The left part, there's still a thunderstorm, whereas the right part is now sunlit and very benign, very luminous, very lovely, with the fields that are divided into cultivated fields, and then he places again. He puts himself right here. There's an umbrella, you see. This is the umbrella, and there's a little figure of him under the umbrella. I mean, he will do figures, but so long as they're little figures. And so he clearly sat there. He was sort of like an Odysseus who had himself tied to the mast in order to hear the sirens sing. And so this is Thomas Cole. He was clearly there during the thunderstorm and is now rejoicing in the blessing of the world, the blessing of the sun, the almost sort of pagan paean to the glorious nature, but associated, of course, with the revelation after the storm. And these are all extremely romantic. I mean, the whole great rhetoric of the crags and the fallen trees and the gnarled wood, all of that is part very much of his vocabulary, and he uses it all to convey his message of moral redemption as through a landscape. And then he has a couple of these great series of paintings. As I said, he really disliked Andrew Jackson. He very much, in fact, disliked what he was doing, and he disliked his policies. He disliked his hypocrisy and his rhetoric. So he conceived of this vast series of paintings called called the course of the empire. And it wasn't even that he meant particularly American empire, because as you will see, it looks more like the Roman Empire. But again, it's a moral lesson to those in power, how not to destroy what we have, what they have, because the Roman Empire, of course, rose and fell. And here, so he presents the first stage, and the first stage is the savage state, the state of complete uncivilization, the state into which, in fact, Adam and Eve were thrown. And he will always have this Gibraltar-like rock, cliff in all his paintings, even though his point of view will change around. So you will always have the cliff here and the enormous boulder on top of it. So look for it. Some cavemen running around with their bows and arrows, as you will see in your PowerPoint. Some dwellings are there. They clearly have already discovered fire. So fire is very much an agency, but there is no thought yet. There is no arts, and thus he represents. But it's, again, very romantic, very sublime, very overpowering. The water is there. Again, storm is not even clear. It's almost as if the storm is always there. It's always present, because life is hard. It's savage nature. It's inhospitable. There are no any signs of civilization whatsoever, and men must live as part of nature. So this is the first one, and then the second one. It's called the Arcadian or pastoral state of nature. And now we see that's the same rock. You see, the point of view is the same. You see those mountains in the back that are hidden by the storm. You can see them now. The point of view shifts a bit. Here we see more of this endless seascape on the left, and now the point of view shifts around. Because look where that mountain was, and now it moved considerably. We don't see the immense seascape anymore. We are here. It is much calmer. There's no storm. This structure looks like Stonehenge. It looks a little bit like Stonehenge. It's there's clearly not just the worship of natural deities, but some sort of an organized religion going on. And because there'll be an altar, and from the altar and the sacrifice, and that's what we see here with the smoke. The further mountains are very visible now. Our rock is here, of course. There's some husbandry. There's certainly there's some buildings there as well, and tilling the land over here, the pastoral landscape. Here's a shepherd with his flock. There's some girls that look like dancing, and then there's a musician there with a flute. So the arts are now, there's thought now, the arts, there's architecture, there is the kicking in of the human talents, but it's a blessed stage. This is where no one fights for another, when one is happy, when there's a perfect balance between humanity and nature. One doesn't exploit the other, and the other, as a result, gratefully obliges. And the whole painting, as a result, is bathed in this lovely light of dawn. This is definitely the dawn of civilization. His next canvas. Okay, so watch. This is our point of view had shifted, and it will shift all the more, because now this is we see sea again, and here's our rock right there, the cliff with the boulder on top, and the distant mountains disappeared somewhere to the side, and this is the consummation of empire. This is the time of emperors and tyrants and autocrats and hypocrites and demagogues. You see there is a great triumphal procession right here across the bridge, with an emperor in his red cloak and his staff proceeding forward, with lots and lots of tiny little people, and the architecture of course is everywhere, but things are already not quiet or calm, because there's a group of children right there in the pool, and they're playing with little boats, and they're making sure that the enemy boats or the other team's boats are sinking. So these young savages will obviously grow up and will participate in wars and destruction and misery. And as a result of all that, the end will be this: the destruction. This is, at first they are little children who participated, who wished, who brought up with the whole new tendencies of savagery and tendencies of war and conquest and destruction of others. And as a result, what happens is that they turn onto themselves, as it inevitably happens in the course of civilizations, as history teaches us. And this is the bridge. This is the bridge where where our triumphal procession took place. And the triumphal procession in ancient Rome was something that was granted the conquering heroes. So they may not be emperor himself, even though emperors, of course, some of them were generals. I mean, that's where the name emperor comes from. It means general. But when a general had a great victory elsewhere, he was granted by the city of Rome a right to proceed through the city of Rome to show to everybody the loot and all the results of his conquest, and usually those were stupendous processions. So this is one of those processions which in the consummation was a stupendous procession, while the procession is no longer. The procession across the same bridge is the procession to death and procession to destruction. As you see, there's a soldier trying to arrest a woman who tries to, in fact, throw herself into the sea rather than confront the fate that otherwise was prepared for her. And here, the point of view now is directly into the sea, right there. There's still our rock, our cliff with our rock, and another lesson here is that nature endures. Humanity will not, civilizations will rise and fall. I mean, this is Thomas Cole's commentary, really, on the Edward Gibbon's The Fall of the Roman Empire. But nature will always be there, and it will regenerate itself. But meanwhile, this is what humanity does within this. Now look at this. You've seen this pose before, right here, because he took this statue from the Borghese gladiator. It's that same pose. This is the Borghese gladiator. And remember where we saw it before? Because, of course, all these painters would go to Italy and see the same sculptures and be impressed by the same sculptures, and then use the sculptures in their own compositions. And then the last one, so there are 5, right? The savage state, the Arcadian state, the consummation, and the destruction. Yeah, and this is the 5. And we're back. We're back to where we were before. This is the same point of view as in the preceding one, as you see, it's just slightly moved. Here it is. There's the cliff. with the rock. So Gibraltar is still there, but Rome, alas, is no more. Nothing but ruin. The bridge is broken. No more statuary. No more temples. The empire has come to an end. So that was his warning. Stupendously popular. Oh my God! I mean, people just came in droves to see it and paid their dues. And so, if this wasn't enough, he sort of got the, when was it? So it's 36. You see, he finished this in 36. So he got a taste for these series of paintings, and he now conceived an even more moralistic one: the sort of the travel of a man's soul through life. I think the other one's also in D.C. in the National Gallery in D.C. And the man begins his journey as truly as a young babe, and he enters what he in fact painted as paradise in his expulsion from paradise. It's almost as if it seems that, in fact, the end he comes out of a womb. I mean, this is rather suggestive. So he was just been born. He comes out of darkness, out of the womb, but also out of this primordial state into which Adam and Eve were proceeding. But out he goes, and he's accompanied by an angel who watches over him. Nothing but happiness awaits him. And again, this is Cole's favorite thing, his trip with the storm and the sunrise. I mean, it's all there. I mean, he had kind of a vocabulary that he employed very successfully in his presentations. So the child is going towards the dawn, and everything is beautiful. The ship, the boat is lovely, and at the front of the boat there's this the prow sculpture that points forward. Everything, the water is very, very calm. Everything is fragrant, green, beautiful, happy. So that's the beginning. So he intended The Voyage of Life to be a didactic, moralizing series of painting using the landscape as an allegory for religious faith. Mm-hmm. So it's the travel of the soul, really. And so it's as you see, it's sort of the same thing what he did with the course of the empire, the youth, and then progression, and then consummation, and then destruction. So here is the voyage, and there he is young, so he doesn't need the angel anymore. The angel is letting her go by himself. He's a youth. So the angel is saying goodbye, and he is sailing towards this mirage of a wedding cake that he sees in the sky, that nothing is impossible, the world is his, God is speaking to him directly, all is beautiful in the world, and the sun is very much high up and shining onto his way. It's spectacular, again, spectacular landscape that doesn't really look like the Hudson Valley, but some sort of a idyllic landscape or South American landscape, and as we will see, he will know about it, about South America. He will not go there, but he will know about it. Those rocks that are in the background that he had painted in the other paintings as well, and well, all is well. And this is all so lush. I mean, it almost as if he's kind of borrowing from Gainsborough. And then comes the manhood, and life is troublesome. Life is not nearly as happy as he imagined it to be. Angel, of course, is nowhere there. He's watching after. I mean, it's not so much the angel as God. It's as if God is still watching after him. That he feels that he must go through through trials and tribulations, and the way Cole portrays nature is the trials and tribulations on the outside, so we can see what is happening in the man's soul, and he's praying to God. There's this incredible array of colors in the sky. The sky is very, very low now, and it's the darks and the greens. There's it slightly open behind him, but he's not seeing it. You see, God is there, looking after him, presumably, but he does not realize it. There's also some sort of hope, but he of course does not see that either, because he seems to go through this narrow channel, and his mind is in that narrow channel without seeing a larger picture. And the waters are none too calm, as you see, and painted spectacular. And there his Cole's favorite laurel trees that we had seen in so many paintings already. The laurel tree is just very romantic, very expressive, and there they are. And here is, or the little angel is still, I mean the prow figure is still there. And there's the old age. And there's the old age, and the angel is in fact depicted several times. There he leaves God's presence and flies towards the old man. He had gone through his entire life. The clouds are receding. The waters, as you see, have calmed down as a result of all these experiences and going through rough waters. He lost the prow figure. He lost his direction, essentially. He's old, he's lonely, he's lost, but help comes. So we must always remember that help will come, and that we will be delivered into this revelationary sort of future and happiness. So all of them taken together represent really just a spectacular panorama of human life. But not only that, but with a message. I mean, Cole did everything with a message. Whatever our peregrinations, whatever our unfortunate events, we must have hope. And hope in nature, because nature will deliver us.